Hi, I'm Greg Dell here with attorney Rachel Alters, and we're going to talk about reviews of Lincoln Financial. And Rachel, as you know, on our website, we have lots of reviews from claimants, not necessarily our clients, but from claimants all over the country who have posted their experiences on our website, which is greatly appreciated, but more so important because it tells people out there about what Lincoln Financial is doing so that these people don't feel alone, number one, in terms of if they're being targeted or something like that, but also so that they know what is Lincoln doing and how can I avoid that happening to me, or how can I get help so that it doesn't happen to me, or I can get paid or keep my benefits being paid. So,
Sure.
But in this video, we're going to talk about, from us being lawyers that have handled thousands of Lincoln Financial claims, formerly when they acquired Liberty Mutual policies as well, what do we think is causing the frustration for these claimants? Because a lot of these reviews are negative. As you mentioned, there's no 5-star reviews. Well, people could put 5-star reviews if they were having 5-star experiences, but they're not.
Sure.
So when someone calls you and they go, hey, Rach, I have Lincoln Financial. I'm either applying, I want you to help take over my claim, or I've been denied. What's the first thing that comes to your mind about dealing with Lincoln Financial?
Yeah. Well, when someone calls me and they say that their claim's been denied, I'm really not surprised. Lincoln's a very high volume company. They have a lot of claims, and they tend to deny. They deny usually when it comes to a change in definition, or maybe just right out of the box, they don't want to pay claims. And that's typical with Lincoln. I get a lot of them. I was just thinking that they're probably the company that I sue the most. So I'm not surprised when I get a Lincoln call, and I get a lot of them every week. So it's typical Lincoln, and it's not something that these clients should take personal. It's what Lincoln does, and people think, oh, is it just me? This is something, they're targeting me. Why are they following me with surveillance? Why are they denying my claim? Why are they scrutinizing my doctor's records? They're ignoring my doctor's opinions. No, they do that to pretty much everyone.
So one of the things about Lincoln, like on our website, we have criterias for reviews about their customer service, about their responsiveness to payments, about their policy language.
Yeah.
The policy language tends to be one of the biggest sources of what leads to denials. What are some of the things that you think that Lincoln relies upon in order to deny claims that's causing this frustration for so many claimants?
There's so many. A couple examples would be the change in definition. So when you first apply to these Lincoln group policies for benefits, there's an own occupation definition of disability, which basically is, can you do your own occupation? And if you can't do the material substantial duties of your own occupation, then you're supposed to be, approved for disability benefits. Well, Lincoln will, that definition only lasts 24 months on most policies, and after 24 months, they scrutinize, and I would say maybe 70% of the time, those claims are going to get denied because they're going to take your medical records, send them to their hired experts who are going to review them. They're paid to review these claims and say that, these claimants, I don't honestly can't even think of a time when Lincoln hired a peer review expert who said that my client was still disabled. It's 90% of the time, 95% of the time, they will say that they're capable of going back to work, and then they find 4 or 5 jobs in the national economy that they believe that they can do, and then they'll send a denial letter saying, well, your doctors say you're disabled. Our doctors reviewed the records. They disagree with your doctors. We think you can go back to work and do another job. And this happens so often. So it's always a battle for us to have to reverse that decision, and we do a really good job of that.
As you talk and I hear the things you're saying that we see every day from doing thousands of these Lincoln Financial claims, I'm also thinking about the reviews that I've read from claimants. And one of the things you just said was they do these peer reviews. And they, it's called a peer review, but they tend to use their own people as opposed to outside people.
Right.
Explain what that is and why are they allowed to do that?
Right. So a peer review is when an insurance company such as Lincoln hires either they hire outside doctors or they have inside people working for them in-house, and they send the medical records and they do paper reviews. So they look at all the medical records from our clients, and they render a medical opinion as to whether they believe they can work, which my clients are always like, well, how is that fair? They haven't seen me, they haven't examined me, they've never even talked to me. My doctors who I've been treating with for 10, 15 years, they know what I'm capable of. They see me, every 2 months in their office. How can a doctor who just looks at my records completely disagree with my doctor's opinions? And they are allowed to do this. So, the ERISA permits these insurance companies to hire these doctors who do paper reviews. And if the doctors say they can go back to work, sometimes that's reasonable in the court's eye. In our mind, it's not reasonable. That for many reasons.
And then you said 95% of the time, probably even more, I think you were saying, that Lincoln will use this peer review, whether it's internal or some other person. It's just a paper review, and then they'll follow that person's opinion.
Yep.
But in almost all of your cases where you represent people, you have at least 2 doctors, probably a minimum, who are saying the claimant can't do the duties of their occupation, or the claimant has these restrictions and therefore is disabled under the policy.
Right.
Why 95% of the time does Lincoln choose to take the opinion of whoever they hired over the doctor who's been treating the claimant for an extended period of time?
Well, number one, because it's their way of cutting the claimant off and not having to pay. So Lincoln saves all this money. All they have to do is pay a doctor to do a review, and they get the opinion they pay for, and then they deny the claim. So, Lincoln gets away with that. And I think it's just very frustrating for the claimants because they don't understand how it's fair, and it's not fair. So then we have to step in and file an appeal and have, their doctors and hire our own experts to refute what these paid doctors are saying. And it doesn't seem like it should be valid, and it doesn't seem like it's fair, but it's done every single day.
Can you, as an attorney, level the playing field for the claimant?
Yes. So we work with the treating doctors very closely. So we will work with them. We have phone conferences with them. Sometimes when my clients are even in a doctor's appointment, they will call me with the doctor in the room. We talk to the doctors about how they need to document, how they need to refute these peer reviews. And then a lot of times we also can get outside experts coming in, to render their opinions. A big one is and when my clients get neuropsych evaluations, and they have a neuropsych evaluation that claims they have cognitive impairment, and then Lincoln will hire their peer review doctor to review that report and the raw data and say, well, we disagree. We think that this was completely, made up, and this is not a real neurocognitive dysfunction. This is more like something that's in the claimant's head, and they're making it up. So they call it a somatization disorder. And they will render that opinion, 9 times out of 10, and then they'll deny the claim when my client's like, well, I just had this report. My doctor says I have cognitive issues and I can't work. How is it that that's allowed? So then we have to step in and battle them.
I know a lot of the frustration is when we're working on claims and we're thinking about the thousands of claims that we've handled, we're thinking about how is Lincoln Financial going to respond to whatever evidence they're presented. So what we try to do is shape the evidence in such a manner where we beat them to the punch, where whoever they show the evidence to, that particular doctor almost has to concur with these particular findings or these particular complaints, so that we take out take their feet out from under them. We take out all the arguments to say, where they can't say, you didn't complain about this, you didn't complain about that, you didn't not take medication for whatever reason, or you didn't go get this exam, or you didn't, see this particular specialist. So from having seen every single reason that Lincoln Financial is going to throw at a claimant, we're able to anticipate that and basically say, here's all the evidence, or here's why you don't see particular evidence, because it's nonsense for you to say it doesn't exist, like you tried to argue in your denial or for whatever reason.
Right.
The other thing you mentioned, which is another source of all of these negative reviews that come for Lincoln Financial, is about the occupation. Mm-hmm. And it starts with a regular occupation and it goes to any occupation. But before we even get to the change of definition, the occupation isn't what people think it is. And why is that based upon the way in which Lincoln defines occupation in their policy? Right.
So under the policy, most people don't actually read their policies, so they really wouldn't be familiar. So when somebody calls me and they say, well, wait, I just, I work in a hospital and this is my occupation, and I'm required to do these things, and I have to lift this much weight, and I have to be on my feet this long, and so how can they possibly say I could do my job? And I say, well, if you look at your policy, your own occupation is defined as it's as it is in the national economy, not as it's defined at your particular place of work. So your job could, require you to, to travel and be in, your car, or, do all these.
And lift 50 pounds.
Lift 50 pounds or whatever, or even more. But in the national economy, when Lincoln goes on to ONET or Department of Occupational Titles or wherever they get the definition, there's going to be a list of occupational duties, and that's what they follow. So, and they're permitted to do that because that's how it's written in the policies. So people are like, well, that's not fair, but the policy, that's how they allow Lincoln to define your job. So it's very tricky. So sometimes, people get denied because their job in the national economy might be more like a sedentary job, when their job in actual real life is more like a medium duty job. So this is where the frustration happens.
And people say, well, Lincoln's totally misinterpreting my job, and they're not honoring the contract they sold me. But a lot of people, it's not even that they got sold, it was an employer provided benefit.
Sure.
And so they're misinterpreting, and they're liars basically. But their interpretation of how a job is performed in the national economy may not be the actual job, and that's a big source of how we work with vocational experts and put together our own vocational analysis to say, hey, this is how the job is in the national economy, and it's exactly the way our claimant was doing, so you're wrong in terms of how you're interpreting it.
Yeah.
Another big thing about Lincoln, which is very unique, is if a claim's denied, the number of appeals they required. And talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so Lincoln is probably one of the only insurance companies that I'm aware of that requires 2 full appeals before you can actually sue them in federal court. So in that, it's a positive and a negative. So it depends on the situation. It's, it can be a negative when you do an appeal. The appeals sometimes take a while, and Lincoln gets 90 days to respond, and sometimes longer. So sometimes people feel like they're waiting for such a long time for a decision. Then a decision gets made and they still deny. Then you have to go through a whole other appeal process. And this can be very frustrating to people who are not working and, and they have no income. So it does take a long time sometimes to get Lincoln to overturn the decision, or even to get to the courthouse. The second appeal does come in handy sometimes when there's new information. So if in the middle of an appeal process our client gets approved for Social Security disability, or there's a new diagnosis or something happens, you can get that all in the second appeal, which is a very important thing, because once you get to court, the judge only gets to see what's in the administrative record. So sometimes the second appeal is an advantage, other times it's a frustration, but it is one of the only companies that does require 2.
So, we've talked about some of the key things that come up as frustrations, which lead to a lot of these negative reviews, but also on our website, we have tons of different videos about how to handle an appeal, how to handle a lawsuit, and this is really just scratching the surface as to the big things that, that we see often. But the title of our video is basically, Lincoln Financial Reviews, good or bad.
Right.
What's your global opinion? Are you on the good or the bad, leaning towards the bad or the good side when you think about Lincoln Financial?
Well, I don't think of them as being very good. So I would say that I'm leaning towards the bad, in such that they do deny tons of claims, and I think their reviews are unfair. I think they're extremely biased. I think that they look for any which way to deny claims. There's in the policies, most of the time there's a 24-month mental nervous limitation, and I see all the time where somebody will file a claim, they have a ton of physical issues, but Lincoln only focuses on the mental nervous. And people are saying, well, I don't understand why they're making this a mental nervous claim when I have a major back issue. I have, all of these other things. And I say, well, they do that intentionally because they know in 24 months they can cut you off and say that you no longer are qualified for benefits under the policy because your claim is essentially mental nervous. And I find this a lot. So then we have to jump in and try and focus on the physical and push the physical issues to make Lincoln understand that, no, this is a physical claim and they should be getting paid till age 65 or 67, not 24 months. So I find that happens a lot with Lincoln claims. So I get frustrated every time I see that, and I know the claimants feel the same.
Well, thank you for sharing, your thoughts today about dealing with Lincoln on the claim side, and thank you going out to all the people that are leaving these reviews, and I hope they'll continue to do it, because it's the only way. We can only do so much in terms of putting out our views on Lincoln and educating people so that they can be in the best position to get their benefits paid, and hopefully people keep posting these reviews. But also very important that we always offer a free review or consultation for anyone that has a Lincoln Financial claim. So feel free to call Rachel, call myself, no matter where you live in the country. We're available to assist you, and we look forward to speaking with you.